Hello everybody and welcome back to class 4 of Hittite for complete beginners. Today we're going to look at two sentences in Hittite. We're going to break them down. We're going to look at them in terms of the grammar that we've looked at over the past few classes, and I'm going to introduce one or two new concepts. So to begin with today, we've got this first sentence, Nu kan turapan gestinit shipanti. The source for this sentence is, in my opinion, the best textbook book written about Hittite grammar, which is The Elements of Hittite by Theo van den Hout. Sorry for my terrible pronunciation of the, I believe, Dutch name. Page 31, and this particular edition is, I think, the second edition from 2011. There are a few other good books on Hittite grammar. This, however, is the one that I constantly come back to. I take it on holiday, I read it on the beach. It's the most easy to understand, yet it's challenging enough, even if you have a background in linguistics and these sort of things, to keep it interesting. So yeah, try and pick yourself up a copy if you can. So to begin with today, I want to break down this sentence, and I'm going to give a translation for all the words in just a moment, but I want to focus on these two words at the beginning because they are our clitics. Clitics are a category of word in Hittite which occur in the primary position of a sentence right at the very beginning. They actually, there's different types of clitics, they have different functions, and they occur in a reasonably concrete order. The two we're looking at today, I believe, are the most common clitics. The first one is a connective nu, and very often it translates to as and, or and so, or something like this. And it's very, very common. It's used to introduce many sentences, statements in Hittite. And because of that, because in English we don't introduce with such high frequency our statements with and, very often it's just left untranslated because it's not really adding to the meaning of the sentence. It's just part of Hittite writing style. But if you want to translate it as and. In older forms of Hittite, there were some variations of nu, for example, ta and shu. These occurred in older forms. In more newer forms of Hittite, you just see nu. Our second clitic is can, and this combination, nu and can together, is very common. In order to explain can, I want us to take an example from English, and I want us to think about how we use phrasal verbs in English. Phrasal verbs are words like pick up, for example, where we have a verb and a particle, but the particle often radically changes the meaning of the verb. Radically or delicately changes the meaning of the verb, but it changes the meaning of the verb. For example, think about how we would translate the sentence in English, I fill up my car with gas. Does the up change the meaning of fill here? It adds to the meaning, right? Because it gives the idea that you completed this action, that the car was full of gas. You didn't half fill it, if that makes sense. But let's take another phrasal verb with up, like pick up. If you were to say, I picked up a little French, it rather means that you learnt the basics of it. How exactly would you translate the up in pick up in this sentence? It's very difficult to do so. Let's take another example. Let's take pick up, but we look at pick up used in different contexts. So you could say, I pick up Sam, or I picked up Sam. Depending on the context and the situation, it could either mean that you lifted them off the ground, that you gave them a lift in your car, or that you tried to get their phone number right at a bar. You tried to date them, you tried to ask them out on a date, you tried to chat them up, right? So the meaning of pick up, of up in this phrasal verb, is completely different depending on how we're using that verb, and it, in the example of pick up, depends on the context, right? And to be honest, if you didn't have that context and you just had the sentence I picked up Sam, you would never really know how to translate up because you need the wider context in order to do that. And that's kind of the issue that we have with can. A lot of people debate the meaning of can in academia, so it's still undecided. It's not known what the true meaning of can is. My personal speculation is that it functions very similar to particles in English phrasal verbs. And that is that depending on the verb, it's going to have a different meaning. And depending on the context, it's going to have a different meaning as well. If you ask me to put some meaning on it, I would say that in my observation, can usually indicates that the verb action was completed once and it was completed thoroughly. It wasn't stopped, it wasn't started, it wasn't necessarily repeated, it isn't in continuation at the point where we're speaking. It's a done, completed action. However, there are many examples where that doesn't fit, but if you want me to give you some type of translation, that's what I would give. Very often, however, we can't do that, and we need to look at the whole sentence, search out context for better understanding what can means in a particular sentence. As I said, Hittite has lots of clitics. We're going to look at some others in future classes. Let's go to our verb. We haven't really spoke about verbs, so I'm just going to translate it for you. Shipanti, obviously we can identify a verb from being in the final position of the sentence, as we spoke about in class 1. Shipanti is third person singular, conjugation of the verb, and it translates to offer. So he or she offers. And I mean offer in a ritual context, so make an offering, give an offering. Geshtin, we spoke about last class, it translates to wine, and we have the instrumental ending here indicating that it was with wine, because the instrumental case answers the question with what. And here we have turapan, turapa means something like sweet bread. Sometimes you see the translation as pastry, sometimes you just see the translation as bread or loaf. It was probably some form of sweet bread. Exactly, we don't know. So we can give the full translation of this sentence as he or she offers turapa, sweet bread, along with wine. Obviously here in turapa we have our accusative case ending, the n, which we should now be familiar with from previous classes. So this indicates that the turapa is in the accusative case, it's our direct object, and we have geshtin in the instrumental case as we spoke about. Now very often with sumerograms, they can occur in Hittite without any additional Hittite case grammar added to them. We will see an example of that in the next slide. That usually happens when context enables you to figure out what case a particular sumerogram noun is in. So here it's kind of needed because it allows us to understand that the wine isn't the direct object. It's like the interpretation of this sentence should be that we give sweet bread with wine. You know, the wine is something additional, it's something extra. The focus of the offering is the sweet bread. And again, this can clitic at the beginning. My interpretation of it with the context of shipanti would be that it was offered once, wholly, completely. And so, once more, the complete translation of the sentence would be, and so he or she offers turapa, sweet bread, along with wine. Let's move over to the next slide. So we've got our now familiar nu can. Nu translating as and, if we want to translate it, can, depends on the context of the sentence. Interestingly, nu also seems to be like, it functions like some type of carrier because Hittite enjoys using these clitics in the primary position of a sentence, and it has many of them that occur in a relatively fixed order, and the nu seems to be the thing that they all like to stick to, if that makes sense. So it's like the clitic that's always there. We've got some interesting additional words here. Let's go again to our verb in the final position, hapushanzi. This now is in the third person plural, and it translates as resume. Sometimes it's also translated as made up for, so to catch up for something that you've missed out, or, to work harder to catch up a lost position. Here we're going to translate it, however, as resume. Now let's look at our first new word, although it might not be completely new because I believe we touched on it in the previous class, although it might not have been specifically this preposition. Anna is an Akkadian preposition, and it translates to one of the following: to, for, in, or at. We have Ishtar here. Now we know that Ishtar is the name of a deity because we have our determinative here. So basically, if you see this superscript D, It indicates that the following word, the following noun, is going to be the name of a deity. Here we have the goddess Ishtar. And we've encountered the cuneiform for this D previously in the first class. Let's see if I can draw it today. The cuneiform resembles a little bit like this terrible drawing that I've done for you. Don't worry, in class 5 we're actually going to look at cuneiform again. We're going to take the vocabulary that we've looked at in the classes so far and we're going to write them in the cuneiform. The cuneiform classes that what I will do in the future will kind of be additional. If you're not interested in learning how to write in cuneiform, you don't have to worry about it. You can skip them. We won't learn anything new in terms of vocabulary or grammar, but we will be just looking at the vocabulary that we've done, not just transliterating it into the Latin alphabet, but actually how do we represent it in cuneiform. But getting back to our sentence, so we've got Ishtar, we've got the little superscript D here, which indicates that it is the name of a deity coming up. And then we've got two different forms of the same adjective. The root form of the adjective is anala, which means old. And here we have anali in the dative case. And here we have analan in the accusative case, the direct object. Sisko means ritual. Now, you'll notice that our sumerograms here, they don't have any Hittite case grammar attached to them. And that's because we don't really need it in this sentence, because we can take our adjectives, which do have Hittite case grammar. So we've got the analan here. And because that analan is modifying sisko, we know that we can interpret the sisko as being in the accusative case, the old ritual. Anali is in the dative here, primarily because of this preposition. Akkadian prepositions in Hittite often dictate what the following case will be. In the case of this preposition, anna, which translates to, for, in, or at, very often we have the dative or the locative case afterwards, and both of those cases will give us the I ending, which we have here. So you have to be careful with that. You have to keep your eyes open with that. If you see a sumerogram or an akkadigram and there's no Hittite grammar attached to it, you look for clues in the context of the sentence or other words which are modifying that noun, which do have case grammar applied to them, in order for you to work out what the role of that particular sumerogram or akkadigram is grammatically in any sentence. And so for the translation of this sentence, we would come up with something like, and so they resumed the old ritual for old Ishtar. And so they resume the old ritual for old Ishtar. Again, this sentence is sourced from the same place as I sourced the sentence before. And that's it for today. We've deconstructed two sentences. We've looked at how Hittite case grammar is applied in real life. We've looked at how we might need to use context with some sumerograms and akkadigrams in order to understand how Hittite case grammar is influencing them. We've looked at an Akkadian preposition, we've looked at two verbs, and we've introduced, perhaps most importantly, the clitics in Hittite, two very common clitics, nu and can. Nu, if we have to translate it, we can translate it as and. Very often we can leave it untranslated. And can, which is a particle which somehow influences the meaning of the verb. I hope this class has been useful for you. As I said, in a few days I'll come back to you with a class specifically looking at cuneiform and the representation of the vocabulary that we've looked at so far in cuneiform. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. We might even look at a whole sentence in cuneiform, but that might not be in the next class, but maybe in one of the subsequent cuneiform classes. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you today. I hope this was informative, and I look forward to interacting with people in the comments. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I always try to get back to people as quickly as I can. A like and a subscribe is always greatly appreciated, and I'll see everybody next time.